Are we living in a police state? Has the COVID-19 pandemic helped to usher in the dawn of a dystopian new world in America? Is being told you can only buy one package of toilet paper a gateway drug into martial law? I've been seeing an uptick in these types of posts and articles in the last week, and while I too am frustrated at our current circumstances, I'm mandated out of work by the state, asked to stay away from my friends and family, not being able to watch whatever piece of shit Vin Diesel movie that was in the theaters. I think that some people might need a little bit of perspective in this situation, because here in America, we actually have it pretty damn good. Now, before I get into this, let me start by saying that I am and always have been suspicious of our government in this country. The first election I was able to vote in was the Hanging Chads debacle of 2000. I've lived through 9/11 and the claim that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction and the ensuing Patriot Act, which ushered in an unprecedented era of mass surveillance and restricted freedoms. I've seen our country crippled under financial collapse, brought about by rampant exploitation on Wall Street, only to have our government turn around and prop up the very institutions that brought about the crisis in the first place. I get it. Government is something to be suspicious of. Do I think that there are powerful elites working behind the scenes of our country to usher in an agenda that suits the rich and powerful while holding down the poor and exploiting the laws of our land? Absolutely. But do I think that our country's response to coronavirus is part of an engineered conspiracy encompassing our entire government to permanently strip us of our freedoms and make way for authoritarian control, or even worse, communism? No. Having what one of my favorite rappers, Sage Francis, calls a healthy distrust of any authority is a valuable life skill we should all practice. But there is a clear line between a dystopian police state or martial law and simply having laws. And in this case, much of what people are worried about are actually guidelines or orders and not even codified law. But that's besides the point. First, let's define a police state. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a police state as a political unit characterized by repressive governmental control of political, economic, and social life, usually by an arbitrary exercise of power by police, and especially secret police, in place of regular operation of administrative and judicial organs of the government, according to publicly known legal procedures. I know, that's a mouthful, so let me try and simplify that. A police state is when a government becomes full authoritarian, circumventing democracy, and using the police as a weapon to gain complete control of the people. I get that it's easy to look around at people forced out of work or lines around at the supermarket delineating where you should stand and feel uneasy about it. But guess what? We all do. Conservatives, liberals, apathetic, tuned out couch monkeys. I don't personally feel like any of this feels good to anybody, but by keeping things in context as to why this is happening and how it's being implemented, especially when compared to more authoritarian countries around the world, a clearer picture forms as to why these restrictions are needed. I honestly think they should be more strict in certain cases, but that's a different rant. Now, let me give you some context. What I'm about to show you are a few examples from around the world. And as an outsider, getting accurate information about the goings-on of foreign countries isn't always the easiest thing to do. But I assure you, I've done my footwork in trying my best to fact-check the following references and provide accurate information. If you don't think so, please dig around for yourself, read past the headlines, follow the sources, take the time to question what you're reading and your own biases before making a snap judgment. So let's take a trip to India. The first video I'm going to show you guys comes off of Twitter, and this is of people at a bus stop. In India, there's a lot of people who've worked where they don't live, and now that there's a giant lockdown order going into place, everyone's trying to get home. There's been a lot of kind of mass panic, mass migrations of people trying to get back to their families. This is a video I pulled off of Twitter from a bus stop where police are trying to keep people in a certain area, and I'll show you how they go about doing that. So needless to say, I don't think we've quite seen that happen yet in the United States. And if that did happen, I'm fairly sure people would lose their shit. So for this next video, I was a little hesitant to show this one because it's been memed quite a bit and has been getting passed around a lot on the internet. But as far as I can tell, this is fairly legit. So I'm just going to play the beginning of this video. This was actually pulled from CGTN America, which I will say CGTN is the Chinese state-run media company, and this CGTN America is the American subsidiary of that. It is vetted by the Department of Justice, so you know, this isn't all computer graphics here. And as far as I can tell, these are real events happening in India now, so take them for what you will. But I'll just play the first little part of this video for you guys. So they don't even beat that guy, just the guy right there. They're also destroying his property. The video goes on for quite a while, and there's a lot of different circumstances. There's a video of people having to do like squat moves, like borderline torture stuff, but they're all in their own circles so that they can be punished, but also social distance at the same time. So just imagine if that were to happen here in America, how people would react. So I don't have videos for these next parts, but I will pull up the articles for you guys so you can see what I see. And next we're going to head to China, who also obviously has some of the most strict regulations, not just during COVID, but all year round. One of the most authoritarian countries out there. And so I just highlighted this one little part here. Two of the main apps that they use in China, Alipay and WeChat, which have basically replaced cash in China, have helped enforce more of these restrictions because they allow the government to keep track of people's movements and even stop the people with confirmed infections from traveling. So basically, people are using these apps to buy and sell things, and that data is given directly to the government there because almost everything is government controlled. And so based off your purchases and things like that, they can find out where you're moving, what you're doing. Are you social distancing? If they know that you're sick and you're going out in quarantine, then they can send police to your house and stop you. So that's just one restriction. Another thing that they did in China was create a code system, basically. So by entering some data about yourself, also using some data that the government has on you, they are giving people a code, or they gave people a code, which is basically like a traffic light system, either red, yellow, or green. And there, that would basically constrict what you can and can't do. You are literally being marked, and then the green people can move around fairly freely. Yellow, probably there's some restrictions, and then red, you just cannot go anywhere. And if you do, it's going to trigger alarms. You're not going to be able to buy subway tickets and things like that. The last thing in China that is vastly different than what we do in the United States here is their use of drone technology. And there are a lot of drone companies, not just in China, but in other countries, that are trying to figure out how we can make best use of these robots. Some suggestions have been having them spray disinfectant or things like that. But in China, they really took it to a very extreme level. And as you can see here, what I have highlighted, they are actually using, or were using, I'm not sure if they still are, using drones to track people. And using facial recognition, they can tell if you are wearing a mask or not. If you're not wearing a mask, the drone would then start haranguing you, insulting you, or telling you that you should be wearing a mask. And it would also probably tell the police to come and arrest you or force you to wear a mask. There's several videos that I saw of police actually beating people for not wearing masks. Obviously, they were probably resisting, which one thing leads to another, but that's fairly extreme. They also have drones that were able to measure people's body temperatures. And these drones would fly around and essentially track you. And if it listed you as someone who had a fever, then the authorities would be notified. If they saw you out and moving around and they didn't think you should have been, then they're gonna drop a dime on you. So you can imagine what would happen in America, or how people would react if police were running around beating people with canes, or if there were drones flying in the air every time you went outside. So think about that for a minute. So back here in America, and more specifically in my home state of Michigan, some of us have been ordered by law out of work. We're also being told to stay home unless we're going out for necessities. If we're flagrantly in violation of these guidelines, we can even be fined up to $1,000. But we're also allowed to leave the house whenever we want to go for a walk, a hike, a bike ride, or just to go to the beach and stare at the water for a while. Hell, our churches are even allowed to stay open. We're being told to social distance ourselves in public situations, and more recently, businesses are being mandated to screen employees before they work, provide PPE, and implement social distancing for their customers. Stores are taking the proactive step of their own accord, not mandated by the state, to limit sales of items like toilet paper, paper towel, hand sanitizer, and cleaning products. Our local and state governments are still functioning, and they're in constant contact with the public, taking feedback, analyzing data, and reacting accordingly. The wheels of our democracy are still turning. Albeit quite squeaky, they still turn. While all of this is a huge disruption to our lives and the economy, I think we can all agree that it pales in comparison to beatings by police and drones that fly around yelling at you if you have a temperature. Now, why do I even care what people call it? 2 reasons. Calling it a police state endangers and undermines actual police officers who are out in the streets as we speak, doing everything they can to maintain order, protect those who need it, and assist in helping to combat the spread of COVID-19. Along with our other healthcare workers, they are on the front lines, risking their own health every day, and not only doing their normal duties, but going above and beyond to help flatten the curve and get us all back to work as soon as possible. Secondly, by over-exaggerating the situation and raising the red flag of a police state, or playing into any number of other conspiracy theories about coronavirus, it helps reinforce those of us who are resistant to get on board with taking the necessary precautions required to flatten the curve, lessen the stress on our medical system, and get us back to work. I don't care what you believe right now, but if you look around, I know you see a lot of people who are still in a sort of denial about this whole thing. At the grocery store, people standing shoulder to shoulder, people throwing COVID parties, mega churches holding services for hundreds of people at once, people who still believe that COVID-19 is just a new type of flu. The amount of conspiracy theories out there is staggering. It's the fault of the Clintons, 5G, China, our own military. Sounding the alarm bell of a police state gives those people more fuel to their fire. It gives alarmists, deniers, and conspiracy theorists another excuse to wave off guidelines and go about their lives without concern for the efforts that the rest of us are working so hard for. Millions of Americans are being asked to sacrifice now. I'm one of them. I get it. It sucks. But we're doing our part because the people we elected, along with the most trusted doctors and scientists in the world, are telling us that if we don't, things will get much, much worse. They're telling us that if we want to go back to normal, whatever that is, that we need to put the needs of our country and neighbors above the immediate needs of our own and our own satisfaction. If you think we're living in a police state because we're being asked to stay home, if you think we're living in a police state because a grocery store told you to stand within these lines when you wait at checkout, or that you can only buy one economy-sized package of toilet paper at a time, I think you need to take a step back because your entitlement is showing. If your rugged individualism tells you that any restriction of freedoms is unacceptable at any time, then I think you need to re-examine your perspective because we live in a land of laws. Our freedoms are restricted every day. We're forced to wear seatbelts. We're forced to prove our age before we can consume alcohol. We're even forced to stay in a certain area bound by invisible walls called the country. Imagine that, being told where you can walk. No, we're not living in a police state. We're doing what is required by the situation. As America always has, we buckle down and we do what is asked of us. Now, don't stop questioning. Don't stop pushing back against the government, because those things are America too. But remember, just because you're being asked to restrict your freedoms doesn't mean you're not free. Stay healthy, stay positive, and stay the fuck inside. I'd like to go back to work in 2020.